Dear listener, you are welcome. This is part 2. In the first part of this series, we told the stories of everyone from America's first president, George Washington, to the 13th president, Millard Fillmore. If you want to listen to the first part, it is on our channel and the link is given in this video description. In this episode, we will start telling the story from the 14th president of the United States. Now, let's take a journey to learn about the rest of these presidents and the stories they created for this great country. Mr. Franklin Pierce. He was the 14th president of United States of America. Once upon a time, in a small town in New Hampshire called Hillsborough, a baby boy was born on November 23, 1804. His name was Franklin Pierce. He was born in a wooden house near a river, with hills and trees all around. Franklin's father was named Benjamin Pierce. He was a brave man who had fought in the American Revolutionary War. Later, he became the governor of New Hampshire. Franklin's mother was Anna Kendrick Pierce, a kind and gentle woman who loved reading and teaching her children to be polite and respectful. Franklin had 7 brothers and sisters. Life at home was filled with noise, chores, and learning. His father taught him about hard work and bravery, and his mother taught him about kindness and books. Franklin was not the best student when he was little. In fact, he liked playing outside more than studying. But as he got older, he started enjoying school more. When Franklin was 11 years old, he was sent to a school far from home. He felt very lonely and homesick. One day, he even decided to walk all the way back home. It was a long walk, over 12 miles. But after talking with his father, he returned to school and promised to work harder. And he did. Franklin became a good student. He worked very hard and read lots of books. When he was 15 years old, he went to Bowdoin College in Maine. There, he made many friends, including a boy named Nathaniel Hawthorne, who would later become a famous writer. Franklin was friendly, cheerful, and loved telling funny stories. He also liked acting in school plays. He wasn't the top student, but he always tried his best. After college, Franklin studied law and became a lawyer. He liked helping people with their problems. He worked in a small office and wore a big black coat, as lawyers did in those days. People liked him because he was honest and always had a smile on his face. But Franklin was not just a lawyer. He was also interested in helping his country. So, at the young age of 24, he ran for a job in the New Hampshire state government, and he won. He worked hard and soon became a U.S. congressman in Washington, D.C. Later, he became a U.S. senator. He was one of the youngest people in the Senate. Franklin didn't like to argue loudly or be mean in debates. He preferred to find peaceful solutions and make friends. He believed that all states, whether from the North or South, should be treated fairly. But during this time, the country was having big disagreements about slavery, whether people should be allowed to own other people as slaves. Franklin believed in keeping the country together, even if that meant making tough choices. While working as a politician, Franklin also served as a soldier. He joined the army during the Mexican-American War and became a general. He wasn't a strong soldier because he was often sick, but he still led his men bravely. Now, let's talk about Franklin's personal life. Franklin married a gentle and quiet woman named Jane Means Appleton. Jane was the complete opposite of Franklin. She was shy and did not like public life. She liked staying at home, reading, and being with her family. They had 3 sons together. Sadly, all of their sons died young. This was the saddest part of Franklin's life. The couple's first son, Franklin Jr., died just days after he was born. Their second son, Frank Robert, died from typhus at age 4. The third and youngest son, Benjamin, died in a terrible train accident when he was 11 years old. Franklin and Jane were heartbroken. The train accident happened just before Franklin became president, and it was a wound that never fully healed. In 1852, something surprising happened. Franklin Pierce was chosen by the Democratic Party to run for president of the United States, even though he wasn't very famous. People liked his friendly smile and his gentle way of speaking, and in the election, he won. He became the 14th president of the United States in 1853. Franklin was only 48 years old when he became president. He was one of the youngest presidents at the time, But being president was not easy. The country was still fighting over slavery, and people were angry and divided. Franklin wanted to keep the peace between the North and the South, but his decisions didn't always work out the way he hoped. One of the biggest things Franklin did as president was support a law called the Kansas-Nebraska Act. This law said that people in each new state could vote on whether they wanted slavery or not. But this caused big fights. People moved to Kansas just to vote, and soon there were violent clashes. Some people called it Bleeding Kansas. Franklin hoped the law would calm people down, but it made things worse. People started saying that Franklin was not strong enough as a leader. They said he tried too hard to please everyone and didn't stop the fighting. He lost the support of many people in his own party, and when the next election came, he was not chosen to run again. After leaving the White House in 1857, Franklin went back to New Hampshire. He was sad and tired. He missed his sons and felt like he had failed as president. His wife Jane became even more quiet and sad. She passed away in 1863. Franklin didn't work in politics anymore. He spent his time reading books, writing letters, and taking quiet walks. He liked to go fishing and sit by the water, thinking about the past. He enjoyed simple foods like bread, milk, and fruit. He also liked roast meat, and he always had a soft spot for gingerbread. One thing Franklin truly loved was reading. Even though he wasn't a writer, he enjoyed stories and poetry. He stayed friends with Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote many famous books. They would often sit together and talk about life, dreams, and history. Franklin Pierce never won any big awards, and some people didn't think he was a great president. But others admired how much he cared about keeping the country together. They knew he had suffered many sad times and still kept trying to do what was right. The worst times in Franklin's life were losing all three of his sons and watching his country fall apart. The best times were when he was young and full of dreams, when he acted in plays at college, when he won his first election, and when he met Jane. Even though he wasn't the most famous or beloved president, some Americans liked Franklin Pierce because he tried to lead with kindness. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, but he cared about the people and loved his country. He stayed honest even when times were tough. On October 8, 1869, Franklin Pierce died quietly in his home in Concord, New Hampshire. He was 64 years old. His body was laid to rest beside his family. Mr. James Buchanan. He was the 15th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, on a cold spring day, April 23, 1791, a baby boy was born in a tiny log cabin in Cove Gap, Pennsylvania. His name was James Buchanan. His family lived on a little farm, surrounded by green hills and big trees. His father's name was James Buchanan Sr., and he was a hard-working man from Ireland who sold farm tools and goods. His mother was Elizabeth Spear Buchanan, a kind and gentle woman who took care of their many children. James was the second of 11 kids, which meant there was always someone to play with or argue with. James's father worked hard and became a successful businessman, so their family moved to the nearby town of Messisburg. Life was busy, and everyone in the house helped out. James loved to read books and listen to his mother tell stories from the Bible. She taught him to be kind, polite, and fair. As James grew older, he went to school in Messisburg. He was a smart boy who liked to study, even though sometimes he got into mischief. When he was just 16 years old, he went to Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. At first, James had a little trouble. He got into a few arguments and even got kicked out for bad behavior. But James didn't give up. He begged to come back, promised to behave, and he did. He graduated in 1809 when he was 18, and everyone clapped for him. After college, James studied law. He read big books full of rules and stories about right and wrong. In 1812, when he was just 21 years old, he became a lawyer and started helping people solve problems in court. He worked in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and became very good at his job. People trusted him and came to him when they needed help. Now, this was also the time when the War of 1812 began, a fight between America and Britain. James joined a local group of soldiers to defend his town. He didn't go far from home, but he was proud to serve his country. James liked helping people, but he wanted to do more. So, in 1814, he became a politician. He was elected to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. That's a group of people who make laws for the state. He was only 23 years old. People liked that he was smart and fair. Later, in 1820, James was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. That's in Washington, D.C., where important laws are made for the whole country. James worked there for 10 years. He read every paper, listened to every argument, and gave speeches in a calm, careful way. He didn't shout or fight. He wanted peace and fairness. James then became the U.S. ambassador to Russia in 1832, sent by President Andrew Jackson. That meant he had to live in a faraway land and help make friends between Russia and America. He did a very good job and even helped create a trade agreement. After 2 years, he came back home. Next, James became a U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania. He worked in the Senate for 10 years. He liked it there and became known as someone who followed the rules and wanted to protect the rights of each state. Later, President James K. Polk asked him to be Secretary of State. That means James helped take care of America's relationships with other countries. While he was Secretary of State, the U.S. got bigger by winning a war with Mexico and adding new land in the West. Then, James went far away again, this time to England, as the ambassador. President Franklin Pierce sent him to represent America in London. James lived there for 4 years. He drank tea with the Queen and spoke in fancy meetings. But back home, something terrible was growing. People were arguing about slavery, and the country was starting to break apart. In 1856, people wanted James Buchanan to run for president. He was kind, calm, and hadn't been part of the recent fights in America. People thought he could help the country feel better. And guess what? He won. On March 4, 1857, James Buchanan became the 15th President of the United States. He was 65 years old, with white hair and sharp blue eyes. He was the only president who never married. As president, James hoped to make peace. But the country was splitting in two. Some states wanted to allow slavery. Others wanted to stop it. James believed each state should decide for itself, but that idea didn't bring peace. In fact, things got worse. The Supreme Court made a decision called the Dred Scott case, which hurt many people who wanted slavery to end. James supported the decision, and many were disappointed in him. He also struggled with what to do when southern states began leaving the United States. They said they didn't want to be part of the country anymore. James didn't think it was right, but he didn't believe the president had the power to stop them. He hoped the next president could fix it. Even though James tried to calm everyone down, war came anyway. Just before he left office in 1861, the country was falling apart. Abraham Lincoln became the next president, and soon the Civil War began. After he left the White House, James went home to his big house called Wheatland in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He was sad that the country was in a war, but he believed he had done his best. He wrote a big book defending himself, explaining his choices. In his personal life, James Buchanan had a sweet but sad story. When he was a young man, he fell in love with a woman named Anne Coleman. They were engaged to be married, but something went wrong. Maybe they argued, or maybe Anne's family didn't approve. Anne was very upset, and she died suddenly. People said it was from a broken heart. James was so sad that he never married anyone else. He stayed single his whole life and became known as America's only bachelor president. Even though he was serious in public, James had a softer side. He liked music, books, and writing letters to friends. He had a niece named Harriet Lane who lived with him in the White House. She acted like the First Lady and became very popular. People liked her grace and kindness. James loved her like a daughter. James liked to eat simply. His favorite meals included cabbage, potatoes, and Pennsylvania Dutch food. He didn't like spicy food. He enjoyed tea and had a sweet tooth. James Buchanan didn't win any big awards, but he was honored in different ways. Towns, schools, and buildings were named after him. Some people liked him for being honest, polite, and hardworking. Others didn't like him because they thought he didn't do enough to stop the Civil War. The best times of his life were when he worked as a lawyer, made friends around the world, and became president. He felt proud to serve his country. The worst times were when and died, when the country began falling apart, and when people blamed him for not stopping it. After many quiet years at Wheatland, James Buchanan became sick. On June 1st, 1868, he passed away. He was 77 years old. People came to say goodbye and remembered the man who had tried to hold the country together. Some Americans remembered James Buchanan with kindness. They say he worked hard and tried his best during a very difficult time. Others feel sad that he wasn't able to do more. But every president has a story, and every story helps us learn. James Buchanan's life teaches us that being president isn't always about big wins. Sometimes it's about trying to do the right thing, even when everything feels broken. And so, we close the book on James Buchanan, the quiet man from Pennsylvania who loved books, peace, and his country. His story, like every story, reminds us to listen, to care, and to keep hoping, even when times are hard. Mr. Abraham Lincoln. He was the 16th President of United States of America. A long time ago, on a cold winter morning, February 12, 1809, a baby boy was born in a small log cabin in the woods of Kentucky. The place was called Hodgenville, and the cabin was tiny, made of logs, with one room and a dirt floor. That little baby's name was Abraham Lincoln. His father's name was Thomas Lincoln. He was a strong man who worked very hard building things and farming the land. Abraham's mother was Nancy Hanks Lincoln. She was gentle and kind, and she sang songs to Abraham and told him stories. Abraham, or Abe as people called him, loved listening to his mother. He felt safe in her arms, and he smiled when she laughed. But life was not easy. When Abraham was just 9 years old, something very sad happened. His mother Nancy became very sick and died. Little Abraham was heartbroken. He missed her every single day. But a little while later, his father married a kind woman named Sarah Bush Johnston. Sarah became Abraham's stepmother, and she loved him as if he were her own son. She brought books into the home and encouraged him to read. Abraham didn't go to school very much. In fact, if you added up all his school days, it was less than one whole year. But Abraham loved to learn. He would walk miles just to borrow a book. He read everything he could find, Bible stories, poems, and even big books like Aesop's fables. He read by the light of the fireplace late into the night. Abraham grew very tall. He became strong from helping his father chop wood and work on the farm. He also became known for being very honest. People started calling him Honest Abe. As he got older, Abraham took many kinds of jobs. He worked on a riverboat, helped build fences, split wood, and worked as a shopkeeper. For a while, he was even a postman. People noticed how he was always fair, always kind, and very clever with words. Abraham never went to college, but he decided to study law. He borrowed law books and taught himself, reading for hours every day. Soon, he became a lawyer. He would travel from town to town, riding on horseback, helping people with their problems. People trusted him because he listened carefully and spoke with kindness and honesty. Abraham loved telling funny stories and jokes. He had a deep voice and a warm smile. Children liked being around him. He also cared deeply about right and wrong. In his late 20s, Abraham met a woman named Mary Todd. She was smart, came from a wealthy family, and liked talking about politics. They got married on November 4th, 1842. Together, they had 4 sons: Robert, Edward, Willie, and Tad. Sadly, 2 of their children, Edward and Willie, died when they were very young. This made Abraham and Mary very sad. As Abraham worked as a lawyer, he started thinking more about helping his country. He believed all people should be treated fairly. He didn't like slavery, when people were forced to work without pay and couldn't leave or live freely. Abraham thought slavery was wrong. He decided to get into politics, which means helping make rules and laws for the country. He gave speeches and tried to help people understand why being fair to everyone mattered. He became a member of the U.S. House of Representatives in 1847. But after a while, he went back to being a lawyer. Then something happened. In 1854, a law was passed that allowed slavery to spread into new lands. Abraham didn't like this at all. He gave many speeches and said that slavery should not grow. More and more people began to listen to him. In 1860, something amazing happened. Abraham Lincoln was chosen to run for president of the United States. He didn't come from a rich family. He didn't have fancy clothes or a fancy education. But people saw how honest he was. They believed he would do what was right. And so, on March 4th, 1861, Abraham Lincoln became the 16th president of the United States. But not everyone was happy about that. Some states in the South wanted to keep slavery, and when Abraham said it was wrong, they decided to leave the country and form their own. This started a terrible time called the Civil War. Brothers fought brothers. Towns were burned. People were scared and sad. But Abraham stayed calm. He believed the country should stay together. He worked day and night to guide the nation. He listened to his advisors, read many letters, and gave powerful speeches. One of his most famous speeches was called the Gettysburg Address, where he said, "All men are created equal." During the war, Abraham made a brave choice. On January 1st, 1863, he signed a paper called the Emancipation Proclamation. It said that slaves in the South were now free. This made many people cheer, especially those who had suffered for so long. The war was long and hard, but in 1865 it finally ended. The country had been saved, and slavery had been stopped. Abraham was tired but hopeful. People saw Abraham Lincoln as a hero. He was tall, kind, and brave. He always tried to do what was right, even when it was hard. He loved reading, walking outdoors, and telling funny stories. His favorite meal was simple. He liked apples, corn cakes, and hot coffee. But just when the country began to heal, something terrible happened. On April 14th, 1865, Abraham went to the theater with his wife Mary. A man who was angry about the war sneaked into the theater and shot him. The next morning, April 15th, 1865, Abraham Lincoln died. The whole country cried. People lined the streets for miles as his body was taken home to be buried. They remembered him with love and tears. Even though he was gone, Abraham left behind a better country. People remembered his wisdom, his patience, and his deep belief in fairness. He never gave up, even when life was hard. He never stopped caring about people. Abraham didn't receive awards during his life the way people do today, but after he died, schools were named after him, statues were built, and a giant memorial in Washington, D.C. was created just for him. His face is on the penny and the $5 bill. He is often called one of the greatest presidents ever. People love Abraham Lincoln because he was humble and brave. He came from a small log cabin, but his heart was big. He believed in fairness, honesty, and kindness. He lived through the worst times, the loss of his mother, the sadness of war, and the deaths of his sons. But he also had some of the best times, being elected president, helping people, and ending slavery. In the quiet moments, Abraham liked to read and walk. He loved poetry. He loved his family. He didn't care for fancy things. He just wanted to help. And he did. Even today, people all around the world remember Abraham Lincoln. They remember his tall hat, his gentle smile, and his powerful words. But most of all, they remember his heart. So if you ever feel small or unsure of yourself, just remember Abraham Lincoln, the boy who read by firelight, who worked hard, who stood up for what was right, and who helped make the world a kinder place. Let his story remind us, even the smallest cabin can hold the biggest dreams. And kindness, honesty, and courage will always be remembered. Mr. Andrew Johnson. He was the 17th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, in a little town called Raleigh, in the state of North Carolina, a baby boy was born on December 29, 1808. The baby's name was Andrew Johnson. He didn't come into a rich family. In fact, his family was very poor. His father, Jacob Johnson, worked hard doing many different jobs. He was a porter at an inn, helped clean and carry things, and even rang the town bell. His mother, Mary Polly Johnson, was kind and caring. She worked as a spinner and washerwoman, trying to earn enough money to take care of the family. Little Andrew didn't have toys or books. He didn't go to a nice school or wear fancy clothes. When Andrew was only 3 years old, something very sad happened. His father, Jacob, died while trying to save some people from drowning. That left Mary to care for Andrew and his older brother all by herself. She worked hard, but it wasn't easy. Since they were poor, Andrew had to start working when he was very young. He didn't get to go to school like other children. He never even went to college. When Andrew was just 10 years old, his mother sent him to work as an apprentice to a tailor, a person who sews clothes. Andrew worked from morning to night, learning how to stitch coats, pants, and jackets. But Andrew didn't like being told what to do all the time. One day, when he was about 16 years old, he ran away from the tailor shop with his brother. They moved to different places, working and traveling. Finally, they ended up in Greenville, Tennessee. There, Andrew opened a little tailor shop of his own. He sewed clothes for people and earned money. But something else happened that changed his life. A kind lady named Eliza McCardle, who would later become his wife, taught him how to read and write better. They got married in 1827 when Andrew was 18 and Eliza was just a bit younger. Eliza was smart, calm, and very supportive. She helped Andrew learn more about the world. Andrew liked talking to people. He would listen to them and share his thoughts too. People noticed that even though he didn't have much education, he was smart, hardworking, and fair. Soon, he started giving speeches in his town. Andrew entered politics because he wanted to help poor people just like himself. He believed that everyone, no matter how rich or poor, should have a voice. He started as a town alderman, then became mayor of Greenville. After that, he was elected to the Tennessee State Legislature and later to the U.S. House of Representatives. Andrew was a Democrat and he believed in helping small farmers and workers. He didn't like big banks or powerful businessmen controlling everything. He spoke strongly and didn't back down. Some people liked that about him and others thought he was too stubborn. Later, he became the governor of Tennessee and then a U.S. senator. Even when Tennessee left the Union during the Civil War, Andrew stayed loyal to the United States. He was the only Southern senator who did. President Abraham Lincoln noticed this and respected him. Lincoln made Andrew the military governor of Tennessee during the war. Then came a big moment. In 1864, during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln ran for re-election. To show unity between the North and South, he chose Andrew Johnson, a Southern Democrat, to be his vice president. They won the election, but just a little while later, something very sad happened. President Lincoln was shot and died in April 1865. That meant Andrew Johnson, the tailor's son with no schooling, became the 17th president of the United States. Becoming president wasn't easy. The country was in a mess after the Civil War. The South was broken, people were hurting, and slavery had just ended. The big question was, how should the country heal? And what would happen to the Southern states and the people who had once been slaves? Andrew believed in bringing the country back together quickly. He allowed many Southern states to rejoin the Union without punishing them too harshly. But this made many people in Congress angry. They felt he wasn't protecting the rights of the newly freed African Americans. Andrew vetoed laws that Congress passed to help former slaves. He said he wanted states to decide for themselves. But Congress didn't agree. They passed the laws anyway, even over his veto. Many people in Congress became upset with Andrew Johnson. In 1868, they even tried to remove him from the presidency. This is called impeachment. The House of Representatives voted to impeach him, but when the Senate voted, they were one vote short of removing him. So Andrew stayed president, but his power was weakened. His time as president was full of arguments and hard times. He didn't do many big projects, but he did buy Alaska from Russia, which turned out to be a very smart choice many years later. After his presidency ended in 1869, Andrew went back home to Tennessee. He still wanted to serve the people, and in 1875, he was elected again to the U.S. Senate. He was the only former president to ever do that. But sadly, he died later that year on July 31st, 1875. Now let's talk about his family life. Andrew and Eliza had 5 children. They were a close family, and Eliza supported Andrew quietly from the background. She was shy and often stayed out of the public eye. Andrew loved simple things. He liked reading, talking, and walking. He enjoyed storytelling and working with his hands, just like when he was a tailor. He didn't win awards like medals or prizes, but his story is still special. Why? Because he started with nothing, no money, no school, and still became President of the United States. That made many people believe that anyone, no matter how poor, could rise to do great things in America. Some people today look back and think Andrew Johnson made many mistakes, especially in how he handled the rights of African Americans after the Civil War. But others remember that he stood up for what he believed in, even when it was unpopular. He stayed loyal to the Union, and he believed in helping poor people have a voice in government. His best times were when he rose from poverty to become president and when he returned to the Senate later in life. His worst times were losing his father, struggling with education, facing anger from Congress, and being nearly removed from the presidency. Americans don't all agree about Andrew Johnson. Some admire his rise from poverty. Others feel disappointed in the way he led after the Civil War. But everyone agrees his life story is one of great struggle and surprising triumph. And so, the little boy born in a log house who couldn't go to school, who ran away from his job, who read with help from his wife, and who listened to the people, became President of the United States. He wasn't perfect, but he was real. He was human. And his journey reminds us that even if you come from the humblest place, with courage and hard work, you can make a difference. So when you look at the stars or walk through your town, remember Andrew Johnson, the boy with needle and thread who stitched his way into history. Mr. Ulysses S. Grant. He was the 18th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, on a cool spring day, April 27, 1822, a baby boy was born in a small, quiet town called Point Pleasant in the state of Ohio. This little boy was named Hiram Ulysses Grant, but the world would one day know him as Ulysses S. Grant. His father's name was Jesse Root Grant, a hard-working man who made leather goods. His mother was Hannah Simpson Grant, a gentle and quiet woman who loved her children deeply. Ulysses had a very simple and peaceful childhood. He wasn't a loud or wild boy. In fact, he was rather shy and didn't talk much. He didn't like fighting or showing off. But there was something very special about him. He loved horses. He was so good with horses that everyone in town noticed. He could ride, tame, and take care of horses better than most adults. People would even say, "If you need help with a horse, just ask young Ulysses." Ulysses went to school like most children. He learned reading, writing, and math. He was not a superstar student, but he always tried his best. When he got older, his father wanted him to go to college. So, Jesse arranged for Ulysses to attend a special school called West Point. It was a school for training young men to become Army officers. Funny enough, when he got there, they accidentally wrote his name down as Ulysses S. Grant instead of Hiram Ulysses Grant. He didn't like to make a fuss, so he just kept the name. And from then on, he was known as Ulysses S. Grant. At West Point, Ulysses studied hard. He wasn't the top of his class, but he was very good at math and horse riding. He became an officer in the United States Army after he graduated. His first job was being a soldier in the Mexican-American War. Even though he didn't like war or killing, he was brave and did what he had to do. He helped carry supplies, led troops, and fought in battles. He was so calm and fearless that his fellow soldiers admired him. After the war, Ulysses got married to a kind and sweet woman named Julia Dent. They loved each other very much. Ulysses wrote her letters when they were apart, and he always said how much he missed her and their children. Together, they had 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. Ulysses loved his family more than anything in the world. But life wasn't always easy. After leaving the army for a while, Ulysses tried to make money by working on a farm and in his father's leather shop. Sadly, he wasn't very good at business. He had many struggles. There were times when he had no money, and he even had to pawn his watch to buy food. These were some of the hardest times of his life. Then came the Civil War, a terrible time when America was split in two. The North and the South were fighting, and many people were scared. Ulysses rejoined the army to help the North, also called the Union. He didn't start as a top general, but soon people saw how smart and brave he was. He won important battles and didn't give up, even when things got hard. One of his most famous moments was when he captured the southern city of Vicksburg. He worked carefully and patiently, and in the end, the city surrendered. That victory gave hope to the Union side. People began calling him Unconditional Surrender Grant because he always demanded total victory without excuses. After winning more battles, President Abraham Lincoln made Ulysses the top general of all Union armies. Ulysses worked hard to end the war. Finally, in 1865, the South surrendered, and the Civil War was over. So many people had died, but Ulysses had helped save the Union and bring peace. Because he was so loved and respected, Ulysses was asked to run for President of the United States. Even though he had never been a politician before, he said yes because he wanted to help the country heal. In 1869, he became the 18th President of the United States. As president, Ulysses tried to make life better for everyone. He wanted peace between the North and South. He worked to protect the rights of African Americans who had been freed from slavery. He helped pass laws to stop the Ku Klux Klan, a group that was hurting black people. He also made friends with Native Americans and tried to treat them more fairly than past leaders had. One of his biggest goals was to fix corruption, when people in government cheat or steal. Sadly, some people in his team did bad things, and even though Ulysses himself was honest, he didn't always notice what others were doing. Some people criticized him for this, and it made him sad. Still, many Americans liked him because they knew his heart was good. He wasn't fancy or full of pride. He didn't brag or act like a king. He was just a quiet, simple man who did his best. After being president for 8 years, Ulysses and Julia went on a trip around the world. People in other countries treated him like a hero. Kings and queens invited him to their palaces. He saw Egypt's pyramids and met the Emperor of Japan. He smiled and shook hands with people everywhere, and he always remembered their kindness. But not long after, more troubles came. Ulysses lost a lot of money in a business deal with a man who tricked him. He didn't have enough to live on, and it was very painful for him. Around this time, he began to feel sick. The doctors found out he had throat cancer, likely from smoking cigars for many years. Even though he was in pain, Ulysses began writing a book about his life. He wanted to make sure Julia and their children would have money after he died. Every day, he sat by the window and wrote, even when it hurt to speak or eat. He worked bravely and didn't complain. When the book was finally finished, he smiled, knowing his family would be taken care of. He passed away on July 23, 1885, on a quiet mountain in New York. People all across the country cried. Thousands came to his funeral. They built a grand tomb in New York City called Grant's Tomb, where he was laid to rest beside his beloved Julia. Ulysses liked simple things in life. He loved being with his family. He enjoyed reading, riding horses, and taking walks. He wasn't a man of riches or fancy parties. His favorite food was probably just a good roast and potatoes, something hearty and warm. He also had a soft spot for watermelon. Though he didn't win any shiny trophies like athletes do, he received the love and thanks of a nation. People still remember him as a brave general, a humble president, and a kind father. The best times in his life were the happy days with Julia and their children, the victory that ended the Civil War, and the moment he finished writing his book before he died. The worst times were the years when he had no money, when he was tricked in business, and when he became very sick. Americans admire Ulysses S. Grant not because he was perfect, but because he was real. He made mistakes just like everyone, but he never stopped trying to do what was right. He didn't seek glory. He simply wanted peace, unity, and fairness for all people. And so, the story of Ulysses S. Grant is a story of a quiet boy who grew up to lead a nation through its hardest time. A man who rode horses with grace, fought battles with courage, loved his family with all his heart, and left behind a legacy of strength and kindness. Mr. Rutherford B. Hayes. He was the 19th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, on a chilly day in autumn, a baby boy was born in a small town in Ohio. This little boy's name was Rutherford Burchard Hayes. He was born on October 4, 1822, in Delaware, Ohio. His father, Rutherford Hayes Jr., was a hardworking farmer and businessman, But sadly, he passed away before little Rutherford was even born. That meant his mother, Sophia Burchard Hayes, had to raise him and his older sister all by herself. Sophia was a strong and wise woman. She loved reading books and made sure her children learned the importance of kindness, honesty, and learning new things. Rutherford was a smart little boy. He liked reading books more than playing outside, though he did enjoy running through the trees and listening to the birds. He had a big curiosity about the world, always asking questions and wanting to understand how things worked. His mother noticed this and gave him every chance to learn. When he was old enough, Rutherford went to a local school. He studied very hard and loved to read. He was especially good at math and writing. After a few years, his family decided to send him to a special school called Norwalk Seminary. Later, he went to another school called Kenyon College, where he worked very hard and graduated at the top of his class in 1842. That means he was the best student. He was just 20 years old. After that, Rutherford decided he wanted to become a lawyer, someone who helps people understand the law. So he went to Harvard Law School in Massachusetts. There, he studied even harder, learning about how the country's laws worked. He became a lawyer in 1845 and moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, to start helping people with legal problems. Rutherford wasn't just a smart man, he was also kind and fair. He helped people who were poor and people who didn't have many rights. Back then, life was very hard for many people, especially those who had been enslaved or treated unfairly. Rutherford believed that all people deserved to be treated with respect. As he worked as a lawyer, Rutherford also became interested in helping his community and making the country better. This led him into politics. He joined a new group called the Republican Party, which wanted to stop slavery and bring fairness to everyone. He was elected to be the city solicitor in Cincinnati, and people saw that he was honest and cared about doing what was right. Then something very big happened. The Civil War began. This was a terrible time when the northern states and the southern states in America were fighting. Rutherford didn't just sit back. He joined the army to help the North, which was fighting to end slavery. He became a soldier and was very brave. He was even hurt in battle more than once, but he kept going, leading his men with courage. People noticed how fearless and calm he was, even when things were dangerous. After the war ended, people respected Rutherford even more. They asked him to run for Congress, which is part of the government that makes the country's laws. He said yes, and he did a great job. Later, he became the governor of Ohio 3 times. As governor, he helped schools get better, supported rights for African Americans, and made sure people had fair chances in life. Then came a very surprising part of his story. He was chosen to be the President of the United States. The election in 1876 was one of the most confusing and controversial in history. It was so close that no one knew who won for a long time. Some people argued and didn't trust the results. Finally, a special group decided that Rutherford should be president, and he became the 19th President of the United States in 1877. As President, Rutherford B. Hayes wanted to bring people together. The country was still hurting from the Civil War. He promised to treat everyone fairly, to be honest, and to help heal the nation. One of the first things he did was end something called Reconstruction, a plan that had been helping the southern states rebuild after the war. This made some people happy and others sad, but Rutherford believed it was time for the country to move forward. He also worked hard to stop corruption in the government. That means he didn't want people to lie or cheat to get jobs or money. He made sure government workers were chosen because they were good at their jobs, not just because they were friends with important people. He helped improve education, especially for Black Americans in the South. He believed learning was the key to a better future. He also worked to protect Native American rights and tried to treat them fairly, even though many people at the time did not. Rutherford only served 1 term as president, just 4 years. He had promised not to run again, and he kept his word. After he left the White House in 1881, he went back home to Ohio, where he continued to work for good causes. He supported schools, helped veterans who had fought in the war, and made sure poor children could go to school. He also spent time with his family. Rutherford had married a kind and intelligent woman named Lucy Webb. She was the first Lady to graduate from college, and she loved learning just like he did. They had 8 children together, and although some of their children passed away young, they loved their family deeply. Lucy was also known for being very caring. She didn't like alcohol and tried to help people live healthy lives. Some people called her Lemonade Lucy because she served lemonade instead of wine at White House dinners. Rutherford and Lucy had a loving marriage. They read books together, traveled, and helped others. They believed in fairness, honesty, and kindness. Their home was filled with laughter, family, and the smell of fresh-baked bread. Rutherford's favorite hobby was reading. He also liked writing in his diary, where he recorded his thoughts and hopes. He enjoyed walking outdoors, visiting people, and learning new things. One of his favorite meals was plain, simple food. He liked bread, fruit, and meat. He didn't care much for fancy dishes. He never received any big awards during his life, but people honored him by naming schools, towns, and even a library after him. What really mattered to Rutherford was helping others and making the country better. Some of the hardest times in Rutherford's life were losing his father before he was born and losing some of his children when they were still very young. He also felt very sad during the Civil War, seeing so many people hurt or killed. But he always tried to stay strong, do the right thing, and bring hope to others. One of the happiest times in his life was marrying Lucy and watching his children grow. He also felt proud when he helped people during and after the war, and when he became president and tried to bring peace to the country. Even after his death in 1893, people remembered Rutherford B. Hayes as a good, honest man who tried to heal a broken nation. He wasn't the most famous president, but Americans still like and respect him because he was truthful, fair, and always tried to do what was right. And so, the story of Rutherford B. Hayes is not just about a man who became president. It's about a boy who loved to read, a soldier who bravely fought, a leader who tried to unite, and a father who loved his family. He believed in learning, fairness, and kindness. In the end, Rutherford B. Hayes reminds us that being good and honest can take you very far. You don't have to be the loudest voice to be a great leader. Sometimes, the quiet strength of someone who keeps their promises, listens with care, and helps others is the greatest strength of all. Mr. James A. Garfield. He was the 20th President of United States of America. Once upon a time, in a little log cabin in a place called Orange Township, Ohio, a baby boy was born on November 19, 1831. His name was James Abram Garfield. He was the youngest of 5 children, and his parents were Abram Garfield and Eliza Ballou Garfield. His family was very poor, but they were kind, hardworking, and full of love. When James was just 18 months old, something very sad happened. His father, Abram, died suddenly. This meant that Eliza had to raise all the children by herself. She worked very hard to keep the family together. Even though they didn't have much money, she always made sure the children had enough to eat and clothes to wear. James loved his mother very much. She was strong, brave, and full of faith. As a little boy, James loved to read books and explore the woods. He didn't like chores, but he was full of energy and always dreaming big dreams. He especially loved stories about adventures and heroes. He read every book he could find. Sometimes he would even walk miles just to borrow a new one. He went to a little schoolhouse when he was young, but he couldn't go all the time. Sometimes he had to work to help the family. He did lots of jobs like chopping wood, doing farm work, and driving horses along a canal. Once, he even tried working on a canal boat, but he fell sick with malaria, and his mother took him home to get better. That illness may have saved his life because after that, he decided he wanted to study instead of working on boats. James worked hard in school and soon went to a place called Geauga Seminary. There, he learned more math, history, and Latin. He studied all the time. After that, he went to college at the Eclectic Institute, which later became Hiram College. And guess what? He loved it so much that after he graduated, he stayed to teach there. Later, he went to Williams College in Massachusetts, where he graduated with honors in 1856. When he came back home, he became a professor and then the president of Hiram College. People liked how smart and kind he was. He didn't just teach with books, he taught with his heart. He also began to speak at churches and talk about big ideas like freedom, faith, and fairness. James married a kind and gentle woman named Lucretia Rudolph in 1858. He called her Crete. They had 7 children together, though 2 sadly died young. James loved his family more than anything. At home, he liked to read, play with his children, and do little woodworking projects. He played games with them, told stories, and even played the violin. He liked to eat hearty meals, especially fresh bread, fruit pies, and roast beef. Now, something important was happening in the country. People were arguing about slavery, whether it should be allowed or not. James believed that all people were created equal, no matter the color of their skin. So, he joined the Republican Party and started talking about freedom and justice. Then came the Civil War. The country was split in two, the North and the South, and they started fighting. James joined the Union Army to help keep the country together. He became a soldier, then a captain, and soon he was made a general. He was brave and wise in battle, especially during a big fight called the Battle of Middle Creek in Kentucky. People noticed how smart and steady he was under pressure. While he was still a soldier, the people of Ohio elected him to Congress in 1863. So he left the army and went to Washington, D.C. to serve as a congressman. He stayed in Congress for 17 years. He helped pass laws, gave speeches, and worked hard to make life better for Americans. He always wanted to help poor people, protect African American rights, and make schools better. James didn't try to become famous. He just did what he thought was right. But in 1880, something amazing happened. People at the Republican Party's big meeting couldn't agree on who to choose for president. After many rounds of voting, someone shouted, "What about James A. Garfield?" Even though he didn't want to run at first, he was chosen. The people loved him, and he won the election. He became the 20th president of the United States in March 1881. As president, James wanted to fix problems in the government. At that time, some people were given jobs just because they were friends with important people. James thought jobs should go to those who worked hard and were honest. He started to change that system so it would be fairer. He also believed in education and fairness for everyone. He wanted African Americans to be treated equally, and he wanted to make sure they could go to good schools and vote freely. He tried to make peace between different groups of people in the country. But James didn't get much time to do all the things he dreamed of. Just a few months after becoming president, something terrible happened. On July 2, 1881, a man named Charles Guiteau shot him at a train station in Washington, D.C. James didn't die right away. He fought for his life for 11 long weeks. Doctors tried everything, but they didn't know as much back then as doctors do now. His wife, Lucretia, stayed by his side the whole time. So did his children. James was in a lot of pain, but he never stopped smiling at them or holding their hands. Finally, on September 19, 1881, he passed away. He was only 49 years old. The whole country was heartbroken. People cried in the streets. They said goodbye with flowers, music, and quiet prayers. Even people who didn't vote for him said he was a good and honest man. Even though James A. Garfield was president for only a short time, people remember him for his kind heart, his love of learning, and his belief in fairness. He didn't care about being rich or powerful. He cared about doing what was right. He loved his family deeply, he loved books and music, and he loved his country. He didn't win any medals, but he won people's hearts. Schools, parks, and towns have been named after him. He was one of the first presidents who believed everyone should get a fair chance in life, no matter who they were or where they came from. His hardest times were losing his father, working on a canal when he was sick, and the pain of being shot. But the best times of his life were studying in college, teaching, marrying Lucretia, playing with his kids, and helping people with honesty and courage. So many Americans like him because he reminds us that you don't have to be rich or powerful to do something great. You just have to care, work hard, and believe in what's right. And that, dear one, is the story of James A. Garfield. A poor boy from a log cabin who read books by candlelight, worked hard, believed in fairness, and became president of the United States. Though his time was short, his spirit shines bright like a guiding star. Mr. Chester A. Arthur. He was the 21st President of United States of America. Once upon a time, in a small town called Fairfield in Vermont, a baby boy was born on October 5, 1829. His name was Chester Alan Arthur. He would grow up to be the 21st President of the United States. But when he was born, he was just a quiet little baby in a house filled with love, books, and music. Chester's father was William Arthur. He was a preacher from Ireland who loved reading, writing, and helping others. He traveled from town to town giving sermons and talking about doing good in the world. Chester's mother was Malvina Stone Arthur, a kind and gentle woman from Vermont who believed in education and good manners. Chester had many brothers and sisters. He was one of 9 children. Their house was often full of laughter, learning, and the delicious smells of homemade food. As a little boy, Chester moved around a lot because of his father's job. The family didn't stay in one place for very long, which sometimes made it hard to make friends. But Chester was a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved to read and learn. He was especially good at spelling and writing essays. Chester went to several different schools as a child, and he was always one of the top students. Eventually, he attended Union College in Schenectady, New York. He was only 15 when he started, which was quite young. At college, he studied hard, made many friends, and even joined a debate team. He graduated in 1848, near the top of his class. After college, Chester became a teacher. He taught school in Vermont and later in New York. But soon, he decided he wanted to be a lawyer. So he went to law school, studied very hard, and became a lawyer in 1854. He was smart, careful, and very good at organizing facts. He was also very polite and well-dressed. In fact, people would later call him the gentleman president because of how fancy and proper he always looked. One of the most important moments of Chester's early law career came when he helped a woman named Elizabeth Jennings. Elizabeth was a black schoolteacher who had been kicked off a streetcar in New York just because of the color of her skin. Chester helped her sue the streetcar company, and they won. That case helped end segregation on New York streetcars. Chester showed that he cared about justice, even if it wasn't popular. In 1859, Chester married a beautiful and talented woman named Ellen Nell Herndon. She came from a wealthy and well-known family, and she was an excellent singer. They had 3 children, though sadly only one, Chester Jr., lived past childhood. Chester and Ellen loved each other very much. They liked to go to concerts, host dinners, and read poetry together. Chester especially loved fine clothes, good food, and late-night conversations. He also loved fishing, walking in the park, and collecting fancy things like silverware and paintings. As time passed, Chester became involved in politics. He joined the Republican Party, which was the party that had helped Abraham Lincoln become president. Chester was very organized and made lots of friends in politics. Because of his hard work and loyalty, he was made the collector of the Port of New York in 1871, a very big and powerful job. This job allowed him to oversee all the goods and ships coming into New York's harbor. It was also a job where people expected favors and special treatment. Now, this is where things get tricky. At the time, many government jobs were given out not because someone was good at the job, but because they were friends with the right people. This was called the spoils system, and Chester was part of it. People liked him because he gave out jobs to his friends and followed party rules. But not everyone liked this. When Rutherford B. Hayes became president, he wanted to clean up the government and get rid of corruption. He didn't think Chester's job was fair, so he fired him in 1878. Chester was very sad, but he didn't give up. Then came the election of 1880. A man named James A. Garfield was chosen as the Republican candidate for president. To make peace between the 2 sides of the Republican Party, they chose Chester A. Arthur to be the vice president. Chester didn't expect it. He wasn't a national leader or a big hero, but he accepted the job and promised to help. Something very sad happened not long after. President Garfield was shot by a man who was angry he didn't get a government job. Garfield was in terrible pain for many weeks and finally died on September 19, 1881. Suddenly, Chester A. Arthur, quiet, fancy Chester, was now the President of the United States. At first, many people were worried. They thought Chester would keep doing favors for his political friends. They thought he would be a weak president who just followed orders. But Chester surprised everyone. Instead of helping his old friends, he decided to do what was right. One of the most important things Chester did was help pass a new law called the Pendleton Civil Service Act. This law made sure that people got government jobs because they were qualified, not because they were friends with someone powerful. This helped end the spoils system and made the government fairer and more honest. Chester also made sure the Navy got better ships. He supported building up America's Navy with stronger, steel ships so the country could protect itself. He didn't start any wars, and he tried to bring peace between different political groups. Even though he did good things, Chester didn't run for another term. He was sick with a disease called Bright's disease, which hurt his kidneys and made him feel tired and weak. He kept his sickness a secret and continued doing his job quietly and bravely. After he left the White House in 1885, Chester returned to New York. He lived in a beautiful home and tried to rest, but he never really got better. He passed away on November 18, 1886. He was only 57 years old. People remembered Chester A. Arthur as a man who changed when it mattered most. He went from helping the political system to fixing it. He showed that people can grow, learn, and do what's right, even if they didn't start that way. Historians say that Chester became a better man because he chose to serve the people instead of just his friends. He didn't win any big awards, but he won people's respect. His biggest achievement was the civil service reform. He helped build a government where honesty and hard work were more important than favors and friends. His worst time was losing his beloved wife Ellen in 1880, just before he became vice president. He never stopped missing her. He wore black clothes to show he was in mourning, and he had her portrait placed right where he could see it every day. His best times were when he was working for justice, surprising the country with his courage, and standing tall as president. Chester liked good meals, roast meats, oysters, and desserts. He liked to dress in beautiful clothes and had over 80 pairs of pants. He enjoyed music, fine art, and reading poetry late into the night. Americans like Chester A. Arthur because he showed us something very important. People can change. Even someone who once played by the old rules can stand up, do what's right, and leave a better world behind. And that is the story of Chester Alan Arthur, the man who began as a quiet, well-dressed politician and became a president with a strong, honest heart. He didn't shout. He didn't fight loudly, but he made real change in a quiet, thoughtful way. Mr. Grover Cleveland. He was the 22nd President of United States of America. Once upon a time, in a quiet little town in New Jersey, a baby boy was born. It was March 18, 1837, and the town was called Caldwell. The baby's name was Stephen Grover Cleveland, but everyone just called him Grover. His parents were very kind and gentle people. His father, Richard Foley Cleveland, was a minister, which means he worked at a church and helped people understand how to be kind and live good lives. His mother, Neil Cleveland, was loving and smart, and she cared deeply for all her children. Grover was the fifth of 9 children, so there was always someone to play with or share food with. Grover's family didn't have a lot of money, but they had a lot of love. They moved around often because of his father's church work, and young Grover learned how to be polite, quiet, and thoughtful. He didn't get everything he wanted, but he learned how to work hard. When Grover was only 16, something very sad happened. His father died. That was one of the worst days of Grover's life. His family had to move again, and he had to leave school so he could help support everyone. Even though he couldn't go to college, Grover never stopped learning. He read books every day and studied by himself. Grover got a job as a clerk at a law office in Buffalo, New York. He worked very hard, and eventually he became a lawyer. Not by going to law school, but by reading tons of thick books and studying with lawyers who helped him learn. Grover was quiet, but very smart. He spoke clearly and never used fancy words just to sound important. People liked that. They trusted him. Grover was fair and honest. That's what made him stand out. He didn't lie. He didn't cheat. He followed the rules, and he always tried to do the right thing. People noticed. One day, Grover was asked to become the sheriff of Erie County. That meant he was in charge of law and order. Even though he didn't love politics, he agreed because he believed someone honest should take the job. He did hard things like making sure justice was served, even when it wasn't popular. Years passed and more people saw how reliable Grover was. They asked him to run for mayor of Buffalo. He won. And guess what? Just like before, Grover cut waste, stopped greedy business deals, and saved the city money. He said no to things that weren't fair, even if his friends didn't like it. People started calling him the veto mayor because he vetoed, that means stopped, many laws he thought were bad for the people. That made the whole state of New York notice. So when the governor's election came around, Grover ran for governor. He won again. He kept doing what he always did, making sure the government stayed honest and didn't waste money. He didn't care if powerful people got upset. He just wanted to help regular folks. Then something amazing happened. In 1884, people across the country started talking about Grover Cleveland. He wasn't like the other politicians who made big promises and played sneaky games. He was different, honest, strong, quiet, fair. The Democratic Party asked him to run for President of the United States. It was a big deal. At the time, the country had been through years of scandal and corruption, and people were tired of it. They wanted someone they could trust. Grover agreed to run. His opponent was a man named James G. Blaine. It was a very close and noisy election, with people yelling and arguing. But in the end, Grover won. He became the 22nd president in 1885, and he was the very first Democratic president elected after the Civil War. When Grover first walked into the White House, he didn't throw a fancy party. He just got to work. He wanted to make sure the government was clean and honest. One of the first things he did was stop giving jobs away as favors. Back then, some presidents would give government jobs to their friends, even if those friends didn't know how to do the work. Grover said, "That's not right." He made sure people had to pass tests and be qualified before getting government jobs. That helped the country a lot. Grover also used his veto power more than any president before him. If a bill didn't make sense or would waste money, he said no. He vetoed more than 300 bills during his first term. Some people called him stubborn, but many others thought he was protecting the people. One time, Congress tried to give a lot of money to farmers who lost crops because of a drought. That sounds helpful, right? But Grover said no. He believed the government should not get too involved and that neighbors and communities should help each other first. It was a tough decision, but Grover was always careful with public money. Grover also looked after the country's Native American policies. He said that the government should treat Native Americans fairly and keep its promises. That was different from what many others believed at the time. But even though he was working hard, something magical happened in his personal life. In 1886, Grover did something no other president had done before. He got married in the White House. Her name was Frances Folsom, and she was beautiful and kind. She was also much younger than Grover, but they loved each other very much. People across the country were amazed by their wedding. Children played White House wedding games, and women wore their hair like Frances. She became the First Lady, and everyone adored her. Grover and Frances were very happy together. He liked to go for walks, go fishing, and read books. He also loved eating corned beef and cabbage and big bowls of soup. Simple, hearty food made him happy. The best times of his first term were the quiet evenings with Frances and the times he stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. The worst times were when people criticized him unfairly. Some newspapers said mean things about him, but Grover stayed calm. He didn't yell or fight. He just kept doing what he believed was right. He didn't win any official awards as president. But the people gave him something better, their respect. Many Americans liked him because he was brave, honest, and didn't let powerful people push him around. He didn't talk big. He acted big. In 1888, Grover ran for a second term. He actually got more people's votes than his opponent, Benjamin Harrison. But because of how the Electoral College works, he lost the presidency. It was sad, but Grover didn't complain. He packed up, took Frances' hand, and went home. And do you know what Frances said when they left the White House? She turned to the staff and said, "Take good care of everything. We'll be back." And she was right. Grover Cleveland's first term as president showed the world that you don't need to be flashy or loud to be great. Sometimes, being calm, wise, and honest is even more powerful. He was a lighthouse during stormy times, a steady light that showed people where to go, even when the waves were crashing all around. Mr. Benjamin Harrison. He was the 23rd President of United States of America. Once upon a time, in a small town called North Bend in Ohio, a baby boy was born on August 20th, 1833. His name was Benjamin Harrison. From the very beginning, Benjamin came from a family with a big history. His grandpa was William Henry Harrison, who was also a president of the United States. So you could say Benjamin had presidents in his family. Benjamin's parents were John Scott Harrison and Elizabeth Irwin. His father, John, was a lawyer and a politician, so Benjamin grew up around stories of law, leadership, and public service. His family believed in working hard and helping others. As a young boy, Benjamin loved to read and learn. He went to a small school nearby where he was a good student. When he was older, he went to Miami University in Ohio. College was a big adventure for him because it was a chance to meet new friends and study important subjects like history, law, and government. After college, Benjamin decided to become a lawyer, just like his father. He worked hard studying law books and finally passed the bar exam so he could practice law. He moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, and started his own law practice. Benjamin was a good lawyer who believed in fairness and justice. Then came a time when the country needed help, the Civil War. When the war began in 1861, Benjamin didn't hesitate. He joined the army and became a soldier. He was brave and worked hard to help his fellow soldiers. Benjamin became an officer and even fought in many battles. This part of his life was very important because it showed how much he cared about his country. After the war, Benjamin went back to being a lawyer, but his heart was also in politics. He wanted to help people by making good laws and leading the country the right way. So he started working in politics. He was a member of the Republican Party, and in 1881, he was elected to the United States Senate. In the Senate, Benjamin worked on many important laws, especially those about money, tariffs, which are taxes on things we buy from other countries, and the Navy. Then, in 1888, Benjamin Harrison's life changed in a big way. He was elected as the 23rd President of the United States. He won the election against the popular incumbent, Grover Cleveland, and became president. As president, Benjamin Harrison worked very hard. One of the biggest things he did was strengthen the Navy. He believed the United States needed a strong Navy to protect its people and trade ships. He helped build new battleships and made the Navy one of the strongest in the world. He also helped pass important laws to protect workers and veterans. Benjamin signed the Sherman Antitrust Act, which tried to stop big companies from becoming too powerful and hurting smaller businesses. This law was one of the first steps toward making sure companies played fair. Benjamin Harrison was also interested in the country's future. He worked on laws to help farmers, veterans, and ordinary people. He supported education and science, and he helped the country grow in many ways. But life wasn't always easy for Benjamin. Some people thought he was too strict or didn't understand the struggles of poor people. Sometimes he had to make hard decisions that didn't please everyone. Also, during his presidency, the country faced economic problems like when tariffs made some goods more expensive. These troubles made his time as president difficult at times. Benjamin Harrison married a wonderful woman named Caroline Scott in 1853. Caroline was smart, kind, and supportive. She helped Benjamin through his tough days and stood by his side during his presidency. They had 2 children and a happy family life. Caroline was also very interested in history and wrote a book about her family's history. Benjamin loved reading, spending time with his family, and learning new things. He enjoyed good food, especially simple meals that reminded him of home. He wasn't a man of fancy tastes but appreciated the comforts of family and friendship. After losing his re-election bid in 1892 to Grover Cleveland, Benjamin didn't stop working. He went back to his law practice and stayed active in public life, always trying to make the country better. Benjamin Harrison didn't receive many awards like people do today, but his greatest honor was serving his country as a soldier, senator, and president. People remember him for his dedication to fairness, his strong support for the Navy, and his efforts to protect the American people. Americans like Benjamin Harrison because he was honest, hardworking, and cared deeply about the future of the country. He showed courage during war, fairness in politics, and kindness in his personal life. He was a man who believed in doing the right thing, even when it was hard. The best times of Benjamin's life were when he was with his family, leading the nation with strong purpose and helping build a better America. The hardest times were during the war's battles and the struggles of running a country with many challenges. Benjamin Harrison's story reminds us that true leadership is about service, courage, and kindness. Even if the road is tough, standing up for what's right can help make the world a better place. So, dear friend, remember Benjamin Harrison as a man who loved his country and family, who fought bravely, and who worked quietly but powerfully to protect the dreams of all Americans. And just like him, you too can be brave, honest, and kind in everything you do. Mr. Grover Cleveland. He won the election again and became the 24th President of the United States. Once upon a time, after Grover Cleveland finished his first term as president, he thought maybe he was done. He went home with his lovely wife, Frances, and they started a peaceful life together. They had a sweet baby girl named Ruth, and Grover loved being a dad. He enjoyed rocking her in his arms, taking walks, and reading books. People even started calling baby Ruth America's baby. But even though Grover had gone home, many people across the country missed him. You see, after Grover left the White House, another man became president. His name was Benjamin Harrison. But not everyone liked how Benjamin ran the country. Some people thought he spent too much money and gave out too many favors. They remembered how Grover had always been honest, careful with money, and had never played political games. So in the year 1892, the people wanted Grover back. Grover didn't chase after power, but when people asked him to run for president again, he listened. After talking with Frances and thinking deeply, he said yes. He ran in the election again, this time against the very same man who had replaced him, Benjamin Harrison. And guess what? Grover won. He became president again in 1893. This made him the only president in American history to be elected 2 times in separate terms. It was like going back to school after a break. Except the school was the White House. But when Grover came back, things weren't easy. Right after he took office, something very bad happened. The country was hit by a big economic panic. That means businesses closed, banks failed, and people lost their jobs. It was called the Panic of 1893, and it was one of the worst times for America. People stood in long lines hoping for work or food. Farmers were losing their farms. Families were scared. Grover had to make tough choices. One of the first things he did was try to save the nation's money system. Back then, people argued about whether the country should use gold or silver to back up money. Some people wanted both. This was called free silver. But Grover believed using gold was the safest way to keep the country's money strong. Not everyone agreed with him. In fact, a lot of people got very mad. But Grover didn't change his mind just to make people like him. He stayed true to what he believed would help in the long run. He worked hard to fix the economy. He cut down on wasteful government spending again and kept fighting against corruption. He wanted to make sure the government only helped when it was truly needed, and not just because someone had powerful friends. One big thing Grover dealt with during his second term was a strike called the Pullman strike. Workers who made train cars were upset because their wages were cut, but their rent, which they paid to the company, stayed the same. So they stopped working and the trains stopped moving. This hurt the whole country, especially the delivery of mail. Grover made a very hard choice. He sent in federal troops to stop the strike and get the trains running again. This helped the mail go through and businesses to reopen, but many workers were hurt, and some people were very angry at Grover. He didn't enjoy making that decision. It wasn't a happy time, but he believed it was the only way to keep the country running. During his second term, Grover also had to deal with some trouble in Hawaii. Some American businessmen wanted to take control of Hawaii and make it part of the United States. But Grover said no. He believed that the Hawaiian queen had been treated unfairly and that America should not take another country just because it wanted to. This showed Grover's deep sense of justice. Not everything was sad, though. One of the best parts of his second term was his growing family. Grover and Frances had more children while he was in the White House. Even though he had so much work to do, Grover always made time to be with his kids. He liked reading to them and playing with them. He loved being a father even more than being president. Now, there was a secret during Grover's second term that many people didn't know until later. Grover found out that he had a tumor in his mouth. This was a very serious illness and he needed surgery. But he didn't want to scare the country, especially during such hard times. So he had a secret operation on a boat in the middle of the ocean. That way, no one would find out. The surgery worked and he got better. He was very brave. Even though Grover worked very hard, many people were upset with him during his second term. They were tired of the hard times, and they wanted someone to blame. Since Grover had chosen not to give out lots of money or favors, some people thought he didn't care. But the truth was, Grover always tried to do what was right, not what was easy. He didn't receive any special awards during his second term, but he didn't care about trophies or medals. His reward was knowing he had done the best he could for the country, even if people didn't always understand. When his second term ended in 1897, Grover left the White House for the last time. He went home to Princeton, New Jersey, where he lived quietly with Frances and their children. He gave speeches now and then and helped out at Princeton University. He loved books, quiet walks, and sitting by the fireplace with his family. Grover Cleveland passed away on June 24, 1908. He was 71 years old. Many people came to say goodbye, and his grave is marked with the words, "I have tried so hard to do right." That simple sentence tells the whole story of Grover Cleveland. Even today, many Americans respect Grover because he was honest, brave, and always did what he believed was best for the country, even when it was hard. He didn't care about being popular. He cared about doing the right thing. That's why people remember him. Grover Cleveland's story reminds us that being strong doesn't always mean shouting the loudest or winning every argument. Sometimes, being strong means staying calm, being honest, and doing what's right even when nobody claps for you. So whenever life gets tough, remember Grover. Remember the man who came back when the country needed him. Remember the man who rocked his baby to sleep in the White House and smiled at the simple joys of life. Remember the man who tried so hard to do right. And maybe, just maybe, we can all try to be a little more like him. Thank you for listening to all these people's stories. In this video, I will only tell stories from the 14th President Franklin Pierce to the 24th President Grover Cleveland. There are still all the remaining presidential stories left which will come in another next part. Those who have done a lot for the country. That video will also be very beautiful and relaxing and you will learn a lot. If you like hearing stories, please like this video. It really helps me understand that you want more stories like that. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any other thrilling adventure. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, every little step you take to learn something new makes the world a brighter place. See you next time.